Hello, my fellow life forms, and welcome to Phantom Myths. One cannot fathom the horror, devastation, and trauma that our ancestors experienced 12,000 years in the past. Events so biblical, they shook the very core and soul of we humanity, that left us to forget all that was before, who we were, what we were capable of, and most importantly, where we shall go. 12,000 years to us seems as long ago. However, on a geological sense of time, it is the blink of an eye. It was during that moment in time that we were reborn as a species to start again, losing all knowledge of our previous ancient ways. Being such a young event, the scars of its hand can still be seen on the planet's surface and in our memories. There are many hypotheses on the cause of this transition. Ancient stories that claim the wrath of God on the wicked have been passed down for thousands of years. Yet it has not been until recently that science has given us a new perspective to these myths. Allow me to tell you one of these stories. For there is a reason why comets to the ancients were seen as omens. 15,000 years ago, the planet was still in the depths of the Ice Age, a moment in time where 17 million square miles of ice 2 miles thick covered the planet. Because there was such a magnitude of ice, an amount our minds cannot fathom, the sea levels were 400 feet lower. What are now islands to us once were the tops of mountains to the ancients. Then came the comet. Like a serpent from the sky, it plunged into that northern glacier. The heat vaporized all in its reach, setting fire to millions of square miles of forest instantly, and raised the temperatures globally. The ash would settle to the ground, along with the traces of the comet, leaving a distinctive line in the dirt. This layer is called the black mat. The impact ejected millions of tons of material into the atmosphere, and a deafening shockwave shook the ground, destroying everything to the horizon. The ice melting caused horrific floods to tear down the landscape where it would enter the ocean. That cooler water interrupted the currents of that time, causing the temperatures to destabilize. A darkness would cover the land, as a black cloud slowly blocked out the sun. Then a hailstorm, like none other, came from the sky. As the ejected material of ice, water, and rock began falling back to the planet, the ground would be pelted so violently the scars can still be seen today. A bombardment that probably felt like an eternity for those witnessing it. The initial devastation would have been unimaginable. However, the worst has yet to come. Because of the ocean's currents being disrupted and the cloud blocking out the sun, the temperatures would begin to drop quickly, so fast that a mammoth could be frozen solid in a matter of hours. At the bottom of this temperature drop is called the Younger Dryas, a change so drastic millions of animals would die, causing many species who lived during the Ice Age to go extinct. Famine, disease, war, and death would be the existence of all who survived. After 1,000 years of this bitter freezing, another fragment of that original comet would strike the ocean, causing a massive tsunami to ripple across the planet, and billions of tons of water would be ejected into the atmosphere. This water would act as a lens, warming the planet where it would then stabilize. The water, after its journey, would rain back down to the planet for days to weeks to months on end, as stated in the Bible. As the temperatures increased, the glaciers continued to melt, pooling into massive lakes on top of the ice that still existed, until it could no longer hold back the weight and break, releasing the most cataclysmic floods down the landscape. One cannot imagine the horror. Everything the water touched would be turned into gravel and sand. As the earth is torn away by the currents, the very ground would shake. Everything that existed before would come to lay downstream in the form of giant ripple deposits. This melting would continue until the water settled into the oceans, raising rising sea levels globally. For the islands sinking, it would appear to those alive as if the whole world was underwater. Whatever existed before would be gone, a barren wasteland of endless miles. Then, time would begin to take over. As the Earth has and always will, she will reclaim everything. Imagine if this happened to us, where our world has ended and we began again. Let us imagine that you survived the initial devastation and you are surviving, bringing children into the world to pass the torch to. Every now and then, a plane would fly overhead, and here you are, trying to explain to your children who have never seen a plane before what a plane is. You describe what it's made of, its function and history. You would draw a picture to the best of your ability, because all your children ever see is a small winged thing roaring across the sky. You eventually would die, and the plane stopped flying overhead. Now here are your children and your grandchildren explaining to their children what a plane is to their best memory from what you told them. And thankfully they have the drawing, because now there's no visual in the sky. This story of a plane now gets passed down from generation to generation by this ever technologically devolving group of people for 12,000 years. And by the end of those 12,000 years, the picture you had drawn is long gone. Your image and name have been changed, more than likely deified, and the plane flying overhead is now a fire-breathing dragon. Your original description of a plane has been completely warped into a mythological story, because it is nothing but the result of a 12,000-year-long telephone game. This would explain the confusion, contradictions, and mysticism of the stories our species have passed down for thousands of years, because they are themselves just the frantic attempts to try to remember the previous story. We also must consider the corruption of man, always looking for a way to control the people. And what better way to do so than to warp the truth? So instead of arguing who has the correct story, like we've been doing for thousands of years, killing one another over and getting nowhere, let us back up and view all of these ancient myths and stories at the same time, where we can now find the characteristics in which they all share. For an example, the biblical flood, the Noah's Ark story. Well, not only is this a cataclysmic flood myth, but so is the story of Atlantis. And there are hundreds, possibly thousands, of cataclysmic, world-destroying flood myths all across the planet from every continent. And these stories are the memory of that event 12,000 years ago, peeking its way out from behind the shadows of myth. We live our lives with the illusion of stability, existing in a fragile bubble that we believe will not pop. However, as all cities and civilizations of the past have ended, one day our world will too. Hopefully, there will be survivors who would tell our story to their descendants, where people would then speak of a time before, a time when the gods walked the earth, healing the sick, creating remarkable buildings, having the ability to fly, and even go to the moon. And in time, even we will become myth. It is time for us to wake up and find the truth of our human species.